Hello, hello. It has been, as the young people say, a hot minute since I have done a book review, and I realised I was overthinking it. And I was sitting here, I just finished some study. I'm doing my library studies, and I thought, well, while I'm sitting here with my cup of tea, I'm going to do a book review. Hi, I'm Stella. Welcome to my channel of 30 Books, where I predominantly talk about Australian books to get you to run out and buy or borrow from a friend or the public library an Australian book to help keep our Australian publishing industry flourishing and our authors afloat. Big thanks to Scott over in Gunpowder Fiction and Plot for recommending Sanya Rushdi's Hospital. This book was recently shortlisted for the Stella Prize. It's interesting because Sanya is a Bengali Australian writer, but this novel was originally written in Bengali and translated into English. I haven't quite finished it, but I got to get it back to the library, so I wanted to talk about it now so I can quickly go back and read it and get it back because someone's waiting for it. I'm a bad library member. Anyway, this is the story of a young woman in her 30s who's having another psychotic episode, and she is hospitalised. And you could say she's an unreliable narrator, because is what she is experiencing psychosis, or is it really happening? But then at the same time, she's not that unreliable because she has an awareness of her psychosis. It sounds harrowing, but it's not. It's quite small. It's extremely, and an insight into her fractured mind. This is her first novel, a debut novel, and a lot of people are calling it daring, which it is, but you also realise that this is very much so, it's written from first person, that this must be based on real life experiences. It is filled with empathy, and you are moving along with the protagonist in this book. So that is Hospital by Sanya Rushdi. Other books I have been reading along with a magazine. So I have read My Father and Other Animals, How I Took on the Family Farm. I took it on holidays with me, so I've seen a lot of pool action. Non-fiction, love non-fiction. Sam Vincent. Vincent is a writer, journalist. He's living in Canberra. He grew up on a farm. He doesn't know a lot about farming, and his father has an accident, and so he goes to the farm to help out. Beautiful, hilarious insight into his father. If you love the Australian vernacular, you'll love this. And within the story of Sam becoming more and more enmeshed in farm life is also an exploration of modern farming technologies and modern farming and the effect on not just the land, the devastating effect on land, but the devastating effect on the farmer. And because in Australia, there's a really high suicide rate among farmers, and really with climate change and farms turning into agri-businesses, less than farms, the rate is not going to go down. Like there's a crisis. He talks a lot about sustainable farming practices and gives us statistics of the mental health of farmers who do farm in this particular way, but really the dominance is the agri-business. Beautiful novel. You know, there are parts, of course, you don't have to know. I feel like I learned a lot, but there are parts where I did kind of skip over. I thought that's a little bit dry, but on the whole, I loved it. Thought it was a great book, and I read it at the same time. Now, a friend of mine had an article in The Monthly. It's an Australian magazine, probably investigative journalist, as the name suggests, comes out once a month. It's not a magazine I always gravitate to because I do find Well, of course, they use experienced writers, but there never seems to be sort of fresh new writers. It can be a bit fusty and musty, except for my friend Kath, who has written a fantastic article. She is a journalist called Down on the Farm. And there's a little piggly wiggly. It really is about animal cruelty in farming. However, she is not blaming abattoir workers or farmers, because there's an incident in Sam's book where he talks about slapping a cow, and he is ashamed of what he did, but then he thinks about this is how farmers kind of survive, and people aren't inherently cruel, but that is what they get pushed into when you become a farmer with an animal. You have to disassociate with yourself, them. I mean, they're animals. They don't know what you want or what you're thinking. And Kath does the same. Like, she talks about that the cruelty is because of the system, the way we farm, and that's why it happens. So I can highly recommend her article. There's some beautiful article in there which kind of saved me, because, you know, when I read the magazine, I thought, oh my gosh, I know all this stuff. What am I supposed to do with it? Gorgeous little piece about Margaret Fulton, who would have turned 100 this year. And Margaret Fulton was our first sort of celebrity chef here in Australia. There was no one's mother that didn't have Margaret Fulton's cookbook. She was the food or cooking editor of Women's Weekly. Yes, there was a lot of, you know, tin stuff going on, but she evolved and she changed as well. Now, Margaret Fulton, and she was really gorgeous, friendly kind of. I saw her in interviews later on in life. She was a real flirt, not posh at all. And Margaret talked about, well, her philosophy really was, well, women have been given this role, so this is in the 1950s, of like being cook. Let's turn it into an art form then. So it wasn't about further pressurising women. So that is the monthly. Other books that I have been reading, Kate Mildenhall's beautiful, beautiful book, The Hummingbird Effect. 4 timelines, 4 women, all connected. Kate is a Melbourne writer, Australia. So it is in Footscray 1933, speaking of abattoirs. Sanctuary Gardens Aged Care 2020, right in the middle of a Melbourne lockdown. Now, I heard Kate speaking about she wanted to keep this, or the publisher said keep it to a minimum, because Australians, especially Melbourneites, were not ready to read about lockdown. It's true, because when I was around, I thought, well, but it is kept to a minimum. And the beautiful thing is that even though it's in the aged care workers, very human, so you get to see it from their point of view as well. Then New Coast, Footscray 2031 and New Coast 2181. And the Footscray 2031, now I'm going to talk about this a bit later too, is a lesbian couple. It's really interesting, because I'll mention this about later on, and about sex. Find the Footscray 1933 is set in Meatworks, and Kate, I don't know how she did, really, her sense of place is extraordinary. Like the vision of it in my head, like how it looked, what people might have been wearing, the language that they spoke. You were transported back almost 100 years. So what is the Hummingbird Effect, I hear you ask? Well, you'll have to read the book and find out. Congratulations on a great book, Kate. Got a lot of hype is Green Dot by Madeleine Gray. Here is Stephen is clawing her way through her mid-20s, working as an underpaid comment moderator in an overly air-conditioned newsroom by day, and kicking around Sydney with her 2 best friends by night. So she hasn't got a lot of money or stability, which is really what she wants in a relationship. So she hooks up with a married man because he represents that stability that she wished she had. It is not the book I expected it to be, and which is kind of a good thing, because I thought it was going to be like raw and uncompromising, and she's going to be savagely funny. I didn't find it particularly humorous at all. It's probably not aimed at my age group, but it was beautiful. And what I found refreshing is that her relationship with the married man, even though, of course, you know, you're reading it the whole time thinking, give it up, give it up. There's nothing actually ugly about it. Like, the sex is not ugly. And in fact, she quite modestly talks about the sex. It's not explicit. Now, her insights though into the male psyche and the way men operate and her experiences with men and sex are really not just interesting, but I thought really on point. And I was not aware of this stuff when I was in my 20s. So I thought it was really remarkable. And the way young women, how much more in tune they are with what's going on in the patriarchy. I thought it was really great. Now, she had also had a girlfriend previously, so she's either bisexual or a lesbian. And the reason I bring that up is that once she did talk about lesbian sex, and I've got to say, from the character that the lesbian couple in Kate Mildenhall's book, and I'm going to talk about another book by Miranda July, I think the lesbians are having the good sex. Tell me in the comments, am I right? I don't know. Like, it's not something I've experienced. Now, speaking of non-Australian books, did I just say that? So I read Miranda July's All Four. Now, I was prepared to hate this book because I think Miranda July is vacuous, and I had read her previous book, For the Love of a Bad Man, or The First Bad Man, and seen her movie many years ago, which, give me my 2 hours back. But I didn't hate it. And a lot of people talked about that they liked the first half of the book, but the second, where I actually quite like the second half. It is about an artist who gets given a rather large grant and or a windfall of money, and she goes to drive from Los Angeles all the way over to New York. She gets half an hour out of town, and that's where she stays for 1 month. She develops an obsession, what seems to be a reciprocal obsession, with a very young man. Now, she is married with a child, and it is a very sexual relationship, but they never have sex. And that is all you're going to get from me. Like, people seem to either love it or love it. So I don't know. And is she cold and distant? Is it a privilege that she could spend all this money? And I'm not going to tell you how she spends the money. It's really interesting. So that's Miranda July's All Four. Now, the other book that I read, Graham Norton, A Keeper. Now, Graham Norton, as in the chat show host, who I really enjoy and I think is hilarious. This book, though, like, why? Why? And my argument is, of course, why can celebrities just stop, please, writing books? And there's an Elle Macpherson book out at the moment, and she's saying that, you know, she used holistic methods to cure her cancer. I mean, it's just so irresponsible and wrong. My other argument is, if Elle Macpherson gets to be a writer, why can't I be a supermodel? And you might say, well, Stella, have you looked in the mirror lately? But I can guarantee that Elle Macpherson used a ghostwriter. So by that same token, can't I use a body double? And that's all I've got time for this time around. Hopefully it won't be too long in the distance where I can do some more book reviews. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.